Living Adventurously is brought to you in partnership with Komoot, the route planning and navigation app that helps you make the most of your outdoor adventures. Whether you're cycling, hiking, running, or bike packing, Komoot's easy-to-use technology will get you out the door and exploring more of the great outdoors. You can see where I've been exploring by checking out the highlights of my journey on Komoot. Just follow the link in the show notes. My name is Alistair Humphreys. I set out on a bicycle journey around Yorkshire to speak to interesting, ordinary people who, in very different ways, are making an effort to live adventurously. I wanted to talk about what they do, about the barriers they've faced along the way, and to seek their perspective on some of the big questions that all of us encounter in our lives. Welcome to Living Adventurously. I've written here, needs intro music. Okay, here we go. That'll do. Possibly the first podcast I was ever interviewed for, many years ago, took place while cycling around London. Sadly, I didn't have the manual dexterity of the interviewer that day, Jack, with his juggling of microphones and handlebars, so I couldn't do the same with Thom Barnett, the man behind the cycle clothing brand Mamnick. I cajoled Tom out of bed at early o'clock. He wasn't entirely keen, but we rode together out of Sheffield. We were quickly out of the city, and I followed him all his old cycling routes and the little shortcuts and ways that he knew from years and years of biking around this area. And we were quickly out of the city onto bike tracks through beech woods. We rode past an urban fly fisherman, and soon we were north of the city out into beautiful Yorkshire countryside. Unfortunately, we'd set off so early in the morning that by the time we were both ready for a cup of tea and a sit down, all the cafes were still closed. So we turned up uninvited. We gate crashed the house of another cycling friend of Tom's. And there at that house, after tea and toast, Tom and I sat down and I asked the fine art graduate about life as a fashion designer, about loving what you do, and also about Tom's love of cycling and exploring the hills and the lanes of the Peak District that he knows so well. So I'm with Tom, or Thom Mamnick, as I always think of you. Do other people think of you as that?
I get called Mamnick. I think some people who don't understand that Mamnick is a road that goes up Mamtor, they think that that's my surname.
Yes, yeah, I can imagine that. What's a brief summary of what you do?
I guess I'm a designer first and foremost. I guess. I mean, that seems a bit strange. I mean, I've described myself as when you meet people and say, "Oh, what do you do?" and you say, "Oh, I guess I'm a fashion designer, but I also, post my own clothing. So I make the cups of tea as well. But I run a brand first and foremost. I started a brand 6 years ago, and I design a variety of different products, from shirts to steel accessories made in Sheffield steel to cycling kit and caps, socks. I've had down jackets manufactured, all under the ethos of doing one thing at a time, as beautiful as possible.
Yeah, and that was what I want to ask you about, because I love that right at the start of your website is one thing at a time, as beautiful as possible.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be better off wouldn't you make loads more money if you made 1,000 things really quickly?
Probably, yeah. But I mean, if it were all about making money, then I probably wouldn't have decided to do kind of what I do.
You'd have a proper job.
I'd have a proper job, yeah. Although whenever I've had proper jobs, I've always kind of struggled to, I've always been trying to look to cut corners. I remember starting off my original, when I got my national insurance number, when Meadowhall had been built near Sheffield.
Shopping centre.
Yeah, exactly. And I started selling cookies in one of the kiosks. My mum said, "Oh, you've got your national insurance number. You need to go and get a job now." So the first job that I got, I had some friends who were working at this cookie parlour, and that's where I started. And then from there, I was selling sunglasses in the same complex. And I've stacked shelves in Morrison's, but I've always it's a means to an end, innit? Doing jobs like that, it's just to get a bit of money.
And you say with those other jobs you cut corners. What do you mean? You just don't really care and just rush it out?
Yeah, just not been. I think, especially when I worked at Morrison's, they had some kind of percentage rate, and I think for every 3 shifts that I turned up for, like the 4th shift I'd have just not turned up for. So eventually I got dismissed, which it seems to be. I'm not. It's not something that I'm proud of. I probably never really. I weren't like really been very responsible, but there was just definitely something in me that I wanted to make a living off of doing stuff that I enjoy doing. And then I think there's a quote in there like if you make a living. If you make a job out of doing something that you love, then you'll never work a day again. Is it something like that?
Never work a day in your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, presumably, now you've got your own brand. You're not cutting corners anymore. Are you obsessive?
Exactly.
And
definitely, I mean, to the point where I can get a bit too, whether it just be the packaging that like my products shipped in. All the finer details as you can imagine in designing menswear, and I've done some women's wear as well, but accessories, shirt, and you can become very finicky as to how your product is seen and received.
So why did you decide to go for the one thing at a time, as beautiful as possible?
It's a Buddhist proverb that much like
I thought it was a bit clever for you.
Yeah. Much like the conversation we've had whilst riding here. I've got obviously friends who I ride on bike with, and I've always found when you ride the bike with people, you spend so much time chatting, maybe a little bit more than any other sport, that there's some of the conversations that you have can be quite insightful and fantastic. And before I'd started the brand, we're chatting a little bit about the bike it's not a means to an end, it's the end in itself in regards to, it's like the process of actually doing it. And I think this proverb come up from a friend of mine, Tony, had said it, and I just thought, oh, what a fantastic ethos. That'd be such a good tagline for a brand. Yeah,
well, it's caught my attention when our paths first crossed a few years ago. I love that, and I think it's just a good approach to life, really, isn't it? Really good.
It's kind of about being in the moment, I guess, not
which I'm terrible at.
Yeah, distractions. It's getting more and more easier to be distracted, isn't it? I know we chatted a little bit on the bike earlier about the rise in the internet and how it's like slowly engulfing people's lives. But yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said and a nice sentiment in that ethos that obviously it's resonating with people, because I managed to make a living out of my brand after maybe 6 months, which is quite good.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I've been quite lucky, like living in Sheffield, and I had a studio I played drums in a band, so obviously all my stuff were already in there, so I started kind of using that space to store stuff for the brand. So my overheads have been relatively low, but I've been lucky enough to subsidise a living off of just selling product and keep putting money back in, and just as long as I can pay me rent, then it's fine.
Brilliant. So back in the day, you started to brew up this idea, and you studied fine art, so you're obviously quite interested in nice stuff and stuff that looks nice, and you love cycling, so you start to brew up this idea of, it'd be great to have a brand. But anyone who's ever been out on a bike ride with their mates has had that conversation, haven't they? Of,
I
should do this. So how did you go from turning this nice daydream into actual reality?
I think a lot of it were confidence. I mean, I was working with vintage clothing while I was doing my fine art degree, and I've always kind of liked clothing and fabrics and stuff like that. And as time kind of went on, I'd met people who either ran factories, whether it just be like CMT place in Rotherham, or someone who makes stuff with steel, and been quite inquisitive and always asking kind of questions. Probably much like yourself, you don't mind just opening a conversation with a stranger. I'd found myself in a position where I'd met someone who were running a factory, and I'd said, oh, if I designed a shirt, would you manufacture it? And they were like, yeah, no problem. And then twisted his arm to like, oh, if I manufacture this shirt, would you mind? Obviously, I costed it up, and I said, oh, if I make it, I promise you that I will sell them. Then I can just give you your money back. So he kind of bankrolled the first. He didn't say, oh, here are your shirts, now you owe me $5,000. It were like, we did this, and I sold the shirts, and he got his money back. And then when it turned to profit, then I started just putting it into other products. But I think the initial getting over that barrier of like that confidence crisis of like, oh, I'm gambling my own money here. Once I'd done it and I saw that I had a reception and then I had a brand, I would like, oh, I can manufacture anything now. So then it just gave me that confidence to go to other factories and see how they worked, and then persuading them to manufacture stuff for me. And because most of these places were in a cycling distance, really, I think suddenly this like narrative around the brand just kind of, it wrote itself. So as we were saying before about how storytelling is really important, suddenly like this story was evolving and I weren't really having to like make it up or look for it. It was just kind of already rolling out in front of me.
And so therefore it was real.
Yeah, exactly.
So I find that most things you're trying to do in life, there's barriers that stop you. And often they're either time or money. You managed to go over the money issue by that guy helping you and giving you a leg up.
Yeah.
But in terms of the other side of barriers is all the stuff inside our head that stops us. So what other barriers did you have that were stopping? You mentioned confidence. Was there anything else that was stopping you taking this leap to try and make something out of the fun idea of starting a brand?
Not really. One thing that crossed your mind is you don't want anything to appear phony. You want it to, I've always thought that things need to feel authentic, and as I just said about the story kind of just becoming real and not having to like blag it. Riding with a club and listening to stories, sometimes I got a bit worried that you're listening to other people's knowledge and then you're kind of turning it into a way in which you're is it monopolize or not monopolize? Monetize. That's the word.
Monopolize comes next one day.
Yeah, that's it. So there was this, and it still sits strange with me now. I've got friends they've done the round the world bike trips, but yet I've like listened to their stories, processed them, and come up with like this idea of yomping, for instance. And there's still something that it's important for me still now to be doing the trips and doing a bit of lightweight touring and doing the back. Not just I do love it, but also it's important for me because I want it to feel authentic still, and that's got to be like the way forward really for the brand from now on. I mean, I don't know if I'm trapping myself in regards to that. Maybe it'll get to a point where someone might want to buy the brand and then they might employ me to just continue to ride my bike and do the social media output. But that is one thing that's still a bit of a hurdle in my head as to how do you get to that next step when you tied yourself so closely to it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess there are so many other steps as your brand. You might either choose to grow it or choose to not grow it. Who knows? But over the last almost 7 years now, what have you made any massive mistakes?
I think I've done stuff where I don't have any regrets, but I've made life relatively harder for myself at times by just being so outspoken, like we alluded to earlier when I did the Channel 4 thing. I thought it'd be
mixing politics and bike riding.
I thought that there's maybe like a good. I see everything as a kind of marketing opportunity when you haven't got a marketing budget. So for Channel 4 to be in touch saying, do you want to do this? I was just like, oh yeah, that's fantastic. And you go in there blindly thinking that everybody's got this, looking at the world in this good faith, rather than trying to see bad in everybody. You're thinking, oh, well, I can have this conversation about Brexit and it'll be fine. But obviously, getting your fingers burnt off at back end of that weren't exactly great. But
you went on a Brexit documentary which kind of span what you were saying, not quite how you wanted. And the upshot of it is you've been trolled quite a lot and just had your Instagram account shut down.
Yeah, which ironically, again, I've always seen it as there's a lot of people now that know what the brand is, and you can't. I don't want a brand that appeals to everybody, so I wouldn't change anything. But when I look back, I do think, if there are people who've been put off by, the fact that I voted Brexit or whatever, then it'd be such a shame because, there's so many narratives that can be kind of taken out of context nowadays. And I thought it probably would be easier if I'd have never, ever mixed politics, but it's not so much a regret.
Just an experience.
Yeah, just a bit of a mad experience, I suppose. Yeah.
One of the things I've always really liked about Mamnick is the connection, the very clear connection you have with home.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I'm cycling around Yorkshire for a month is because the idea of home interests me. So what does home mean to you?
Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? Because I'm from Rotherham originally, so that's like what I would describe as been my home. But most of the kind of riding and the things that I'm familiar with on the day to day, which is probably one way understanding what home is, would be like riding my bike in the Peak District and stuff like that. Which is that there's some. I don't know if those two things match up, but I definitely feel at home when I'm riding roads and stuff that I know relatively well, and because of the topology of the Peak District, I do think that it is a fantastic place to ride your bike. Maybe I'm going off on a bit of a tangent.
No, not at all. It's interesting that you say, oh, you're from Rotherham, but now you're Sheffield and Peak District, and you were almost labelling them as different things.
Yeah.
Whereas they're about, 10 miles apart?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So your notion of home then is sort of hyper-localised. You were born around here, you grew up around here. Have you always lived around here?
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so and it's quite clear that you've taken quite a lot of inspiration from home. Was that a conscious building a brand decision, or was it just this is who I? Well, I won't spoon feed you. Why is the brand so much about home?
Again, it's like linking back to that whole idea of it feeling authentic. There are people who they can start a brand and. For instance, their logo it looks like a road, and then it's like, oh, what's this road? Oh, it's not a road. It's just we've made it up. And I've always just felt as though real people, real things, real places just resonate more with real people, I guess. So that I've done it consciously, but it's kind of subconscious. It's subconscious at the same time.
Please, will you tell me about your granddad?
Yeah, Eric.
Yeah,
he's passed away now, but he worked in Sheffield steel industry like his entire life.
Right. And so what connection has Grandad Eric from the steel industry got to do with this trendy hipster brand?
Well, I do a steel collection, as some of your listeners might already have seen, like made in Sheffield, and I just wanted to kind of, again, when you were talking about home, me living in Sheffield, I thought, again, it's an authentic thing. I've got the family link there with my granddad working in the steel industry for over 45 years. So I started designing bits in Sheffield stainless steel and found a manufacturer and kind of told him what I was doing. So I had a money clip manufactured first, and then I did a tie slide. And then I realised that I'm kind of making stuff from bent pieces of sheet stainless steel. And so then what else can I make? So I've done like a trouser clip for a commuter, like a cycling commuter, I guess. I did a card holder, which is probably one of my favourite products, really, that's all made from a bent piece of steel, and it holds a few cards, and if you roll your notes up, you can push them in it.
What did your granddad think of you doing this?
He'd already passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
So
that's a shame, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's such a shame that I never really got to say to him, look how you've kind of influenced me. But yeah, in many respects, it's a nice thing to just always to be able to reference my granddad every time I work with steel. And living in Sheffield as well, there's so much said about Sheffield steel. I know they've got the Women of Steel statue, which I think you maybe took a photo of. Did you outside town hall, or someone else
should have done? Yeah. I think it's brilliant.
Oh, thanks.
What do you think about Strava? Are you a Strava cyclist?
I used to use Strava, but then I just got to a point where it felt as though it was just becoming too, maybe it's just me being overly sensitive, but become a bit like too politicised. If, you'd be trying to organise bike rides with people and they'd be like, oh, I'm not out today. And then you'd open your Strava and they'd gone out and done a bike ride, and it got to a point where it was like, oh, God, it's starting to play a little bit of weird, it starts playing with your head a bit, that kind of stuff. And then also, going back to the one thing at a time, as beautiful as possible, I felt as though it just become a bit of a distraction because I weren't training as such, but it's almost like by using Strava, unless you've got the mindset to I don't know why you'd be wanting to track your rides, really. You can basically work it out on how long you've been at a house. But I just felt like it just become a big distraction, where I found myself pressing on up an hill, and I didn't really understand why I was riding so hard. It's to the point where I was going to like blow up probably later on, and then it were like, well, I'm just trying to beat my old times, but the old times didn't actually mean anything because I'm not training for anything.
Yeah.
Because I'm not racing, so
Yeah, you're just out enjoying it and
exactly. And then the old like yomping your own marching pace, which has become a bit of a sub brand. Like that was probably a reflection to when I suddenly got that. It confirmed in my head that it's not anti-Strava as such, but one thing led to another, or one thing reflects the other. Where it's like it's less about training and being a pro, or trying to imitate the pros. It's just more about riding your bike and being in the moment, really, and doing things at your own pace.
Yeah, that was the sort of sense. That was why I asked you about Strava, because I got that sense of you're kind of overlapping a couple of worlds. You make this really nice gear, which I'm sure lots of Strava types wear, but you're also into this yomping world of just being out there, enjoying it. So back in my glory days, I cycled around the world.
Yeah.
And now I'm up here trying to really pay attention to local.
Yeah.
Today we've been nattering away about these. We saw a fly fisherman just outside Sheffield, went through an old industrial tunnel, and I'm really enjoying this paying attention to local. So what's your take on, I mean, would you like to cycle around the world, or do you find you can get satisfaction from the Peak District?
Well, yeah, for me personally, I suppose it's a difficult one because as my brand's grown and it's all, even my garments, like I do shirts that are named after different Peak District villages, which I'm not sure if you knew that, but yeah, so I'm so like close to the Peak District in regards to how I'm marketing myself, and as that, like my brand has basically become an extension of my life.
Yeah, it's weird that, isn't it?
Yeah, very weird.
I'm the same.
And the great thing about the Peak District is I could do, I could ride every day and not repeat the same road because of the network to the road. So I don't have a massive desire to like fully load my bike and, try and ride around the world, as well as obviously wanting to fulfill orders. There is something that's going on where, like, the more I'd ride in the peak, the more, if I stop and take a photo, then it feeds into my marketing, and I could get up in the morning and do a 4-hour ride, come home and still like reply to my emails, post whatever's been needs posting, and speak to suppliers. So it's like building a kind of a lifestyle around the Peak District. But at the same time, if I do ever want to go, like say if I want to do 3 weeks riding in Alps, at that point it'd probably become a little bit more of a logistical nightmare for me. But I mean, I'd love to see more at World on my bike, but right now, I mean, a good friend of mine who cycled around the world twice, I said, oh, what are best roads to ride in? And he said, oh, Peak District, because the the network of roads are just completely unrivaled. So it's almost like I've took on his experience in a way, which is a bit phony, I suppose. But if he's ridden around the world and seen a lot of it and then gone Peak District's where it's at, then I can't. I'm not going to complain about that, am I?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think you've got a great position where you've managed to get yourself to a place where you combine the things that you love, riding bikes, design, fashion, clothes, do the things that you love that you'd probably be doing anyway, and figure out a way to get paid for them. Plus, you're out riding your bike in a beautiful part of the world, so I think you're pretty sorted. Plus, you have a good network of friends living in random places who, when the cafes are closed, we can gate crash, drink their tea, and eat their bagels. So thank you so much, Tom, for showing me the lovely ride out of Sheffield. Thank you for your bobble hat. And it's been good company. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Alistair.
Cheers. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Living Adventurously. There's show notes from every episode on my website, alistairhumphreys.com/podcast. If you have enjoyed it, please take a screenshot of your phone and pop it up on social media, or leave a review with your podcast provider. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much. I teamed up with Komoot to make this podcast happen. In case you missed it, Komoot is an outdoor planning and navigation app that helps you explore more of the great outdoors. One of the many ways Komoot helps you have better adventures is through their inspiring collections. Are you exploring a new area and not sure where to begin? type in where you want to go, and local collections will suggest a number of cycling or hiking tours based on the most scenic routes. It's a great way to get started exploring in a new place, particularly if you don't know where to begin. Wherever you find yourself, your very own outdoor experiences are waiting for you. Go explore more with Komoot. Head to komoot.com/chi and use the voucher code ADVENTUROUS to claim your free region bundle.